Hello, everyone. So today we shall be discussing the fastest and easiest way to obtain permanent residency immediately in the European Union. So, Laszlo, how are you?
Good morning to you. I'm happy to be again with you.
Yes, so this option that we'll be discussing is the fastest and the easiest, but it's certainly not the cheapest. So Laszlo has been in the high-end immigration space for close to 30 years, correct?
That is correct, yes. Time flies.
So can you tell us about this option?
The option is provided by the government of Malta, which is part of the European Union, and also part of the Schengen zone, which is also an important consideration. Malta has several residency and citizenship programs, and one of them is the Malta Permanent Residency Program, where applicants, after obviously fulfilling the conditions, would get an indefinite right to stay, meaning that permanent residency for life. And that includes not just the main applicant, but at the same time of the application, it's that the spouse and the children could also apply, and they would also receive the permanent. I call it as a residency permit because in essence, it is a permanent residency permit. And then all of them get it for life. So all in all, that is now the only such program in Europe which provides immediate permanent residency. When I'm saying immediate, obviously there is a kind of a processing time. So it's not like that you go to the authority and it's automatically issued right away, but then they have to do a proper due diligence procedure. And then if the client satisfies the conditions, then they would receive the certificate proving that then it is valid for life.
Fantastic. So for people who want Schengen access all the time, anytime, this is the way to go. So tell me about what are these conditions?
Clients have two choices. One is purchase a property for 350,000 euros and keep it for 5 years, or make a rental agreement also for 5 years as a minimum. In certain parts of Malta, it would be 10,000 euros per year, not per month, but per year. Or in the better locations or the more populated locations, it's 12,000 per year. So then they could make a choice. And the government fee, it depends on whether you want to use the property purchase or the rental. If you want to use the rental, which is done by 99% of the people, then the government contribution, a government administration fee, and the contribution is 98,000 euros. And also there is a 2,000 euros which you have to donate to a local charity. I think it is easier if you call it as 100,000 donation. And that is for the rental, and otherwise it's 70,000 euros if you buy the property, meaning that you have a choice. You could wait till you look around, you start with the rental period, then you could exchange it to a property investment if you want to invest in a property there. So you could just change the way of that. But at the end, that is the most important cost component. You must have a health insurance from the private sector, but then for a 45-year-old applicant, the yearly cost of what we have with an insurance company is around 550 euros per year. And that is also, I think, that is not really a big cost. Those are the two main costs accruing. And then the client has to keep the property or has to keep the rental for 5 years. And after 5 years, they just have to have some kind of an address as also continue the permanent residency.
Very interesting. And so no minimum physical requirements.
That is also something which is very important, that yes, no actual days to be spent in Malta, not before the application and not after the application to keep the permanent residency permit. That means that it's very, very favorable. I participated at the conference where I asked the boss of that agency at that time, and then what happens if the client doesn't go to Malta and after 15 years wants to return and show this document that yes, it's valid for entry? No problem whatsoever. Anytime, even after 10 or 15 years, that is valid because that is valid for life.
So interesting. What about the children? So they get permanent residency as well? So let's say you have a kid, he's 12, he gets permanent residency. Does that extend into when he's 18, once he becomes an adult? Does he also get permanent residency? Is it still valid for life? In the sense that by doing this, you're not just getting permanent residency for yourself and your children, but also your future adults that are children now, and that they'll get better access to EU universities, cheaper. They'll have access to the EU labor market, etc.
The it doesn't apply to newly born children. Only the already live children can be included in the application and would qualify for the permanent residency. Obviously, then the children which would, if the persons would live in Malta and they would like to have a family reunification for a newly born child, then yes, that can be also done. And then they could also have the residency permit when they are young.
But what about the older children? Once they become 18, do they still keep their permanent residency, or does it expire?
They can keep the residency permit, yes.
Okay, so I think this
of course they have to. Of course they have to be dependent on the main applicant.
Okay.
But then even university studies are covered, so they can be included in the application up till the age of 28 or 30 or whatever time they are able to get a certificate from the university that they are still full-time. They have still full-time studies in the university.
This is really interesting. So because it's in the big scheme of things, it's 100K. It's a fair amount of money to just donate to a government. But especially for Americans, in some cases, they can actually make a pretty good ROI on it, in the sense that, they can get the permanent residency in Malta. Let's just take like a bit of an extreme scenario. They move to Malta. Let's say the couple's in their 50s, they have 3 children in their teens. Then thanks to this, then the children can go to universities in the European Union and only pay EU fees as opposed to international student fees. So this can lead to very low university fees compared to sending the kids in the US. Yeah. So ROI there. And same thing in terms of healthcare. If one of the 2 individuals gets cancer or whatever, has a major issue, they're covered in Malta at the cost of only 500 euros a year compared to very expensive health insurance in the US. So it's not just paying just for a document. If you actually stress test it, in some cases, people can actually get an ROI on it, especially if it then offers their children the opportunity or the possibility of working in the European Union. Essentially, when you're a permanent resident of the European Union, of a country within the European Union, it's fairly easy to get a job in another country of the EU. So then it would mean that your children would have the opportunity to work either back home in the US, or if they like the European lifestyle and lower salaries, they could stay in the European Union. So it's an interesting product for sure. Very few people talk about it. Why?
I think that Maltese service providers usually only offer Malta, and there are very rare. It is very rare that like a company like ours, which we would like to offer all the possibilities to people, not just Malta. One of our companies is headquartered in Malta. It has its license there, but we are not really tied to Malta. So the Maltese service providers are just really not marketing it with other possibilities. So the word is not spread as widely as if they would, let's say, Antigua and St. Kitts and Malta and Greece and Portugal, many jurisdictions. Then obviously people who would like to get something in the EU, they could offer this possibility. No, they are just usually offering Malta with exceptions, but that is usually the main way, that only Malta and Malta and Malta and Malta, and that narrows the customer base, I would say. That is my feeling.
Interesting. Does it lead to citizenship?
It could lead to citizenship, but then it is like everywhere in the world, whatever is being promised by people, property developers, or whoever they are, that without real ties to the country, then it would be very hard to get citizenship. Even in Portugal, no statistics came out for the last 5 years where people applied and they got or they didn't get citizenship. And that is always a very suspicious thing, that when no statistics are provided and the service providers are not advertising that this is now my 50th client who got his Portuguese citizenship. So all in all, even in countries where it is being marketed very heavily, which is definitely not Malta at all, then there are doubts that, yes, the citizenship with only 1 week stay every year is possible at all. There is no advantage for any country to give out citizenship for such a small layout. Okay, you buy property, after 5 years you sell it. In the meantime, you spend 1 week. How much is the government, how much is the country's gain for that? For 5 years, every single year, it's 1 week. That's it. There is no real advantage for the country to get to provide citizenship. And that is why all the countries are now strengthening the requirements to be tied to the local society to get citizenship in an easy way after 4 or 5 years' time.
Cool. So essentially, it's possible to get citizenship, but not just by having it as a paper residency. You need to move there. You need to live there full time. Probably need to learn the language, have true ties. Then you can apply and then see what happens.
Malta has also one big advantage, that English is one of the official languages.
Okay, so you don't need to learn Maltese.
You do not, meaning that, again, to tie in the society is much, much easier because you do not have to learn a foreign language, which is also an advantage. Yes, you, according to the citizenship law, you could apply after 5 years, but I have a bad news for all the people who dream about spending a minimum amount of money, not having any stay, and getting a citizenship in an EU country. That doesn't work anymore. I think even in Greece, it is very, very hard to convert it. In Portugal, it's very, very hard to convert it just by an investment. If you do not live in that country, why should that country give you citizenship? That is now getting clearer and clearer. Still, there are many people who are trying to sell the European residencies with him. You could have citizenship. You could have citizenship. I'm not that one, by the way. I would rather tell the truth of the interested parties than to lie something to get a sale, because sooner or later that would really be ruin our reputation. In Greece, for example, you have to keep the investment, to keep the permit, even it's not a permanent residency permit, you have to have the same investment, to keep the same investment for an indeterminate time. Because if you sell the property and you do not buy a new one, you lose your residency permit. In Malta, after 5 years, you do whatever you want to do. That is even a 5-year rental of 10,000 euros per year. Come on now, that is not really a big cash layout, I would say, compared to the 400,000, which now at the good locations, Greece charges, it's like 10,000 per year, it's 50,000. I think that financially, that is not a bad proposition. Also, the property carrying costs and all the matters. If you do not move there, then it is a headache. And it's a possible way of investment income. But then there are the tax returns, the filling out the tax returns, all this hassle you have to add to the cost when you are comparing Malta, which is a very simple donation, yearly rental, you keep the permanent residency permit. End of story with other countries. That's my
great.
opinion.
Thank you. So yeah, because essentially right now Portugal is a bit out of the equation. They're reworking it. There are potentially some fund options that are still going to be available, but we'll see what that is. I'm always very wary of funds, especially funds in Portugal targeting people who just want to buy something like now for the paperwork. I doubt they would be good investments. You've got, to your point, Greece. The minimum is 250,000 euros. You can buy on some small islands. Real estate is really cheap. But then again, yes, it's not permanent residency. It's just essentially you have residency as long as you keep the property. So it's definitely inferior to permanent residency in Malta. And then you have also a program that you deal with, Ladislas, the Hungarian residency by investment program, which is not very well known, but doesn't quite lead to permanent residency either. It's very hard to get permanent residency.
In the country. Yes. Again, you have to stay in the country to qualify for permanent residency. Yeah. This is now getting really the rule in the European Union. And I think at the end, professionally, I have to understand that, yes, this is normal and this is how it should be done. You have ties, you want to settle down, fair enough, then live in that country. And
so if you want easy, fast, Malta, and then slightly less good in terms of paperwork, you've got Greece, Hungary, totally different vibes, but both can qualify with real estate. Cool, fantastic. And Laszlo can help you with essentially all of them, as well as passports in the Caribbean, etc. So if you're interested in learning more about the Malta permanent residency program, feel free to reach out to Laszlo. He'll send you a brochure with all the information, costs, fees, etc. So there is a link below where you can reach him as well as his email. Laszlo, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure on my side also. Thank you.
You can go to my website, thewanderinginvestor.com, and sign up to the private list. It's entirely free. This way you will be getting insider information as I travel around the world looking for opportunities. Lastly, feel free to follow me on Instagram at thewanderinginvestor. I look forward to hearing from you.